Hey everyone, this is Avatar Sage 7, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my first impressions of the Outriders demo that was released by Square Enix and from People Can Fly studio. And I can say overwhelmingly that I did greatly enjoy this game. It's pretty good in terms of the gunplay and a lot of the skills. There were definitely the good things, and then there were a few interestingly weird or sort of bad things that I had in terms of impressions, anyways, about the game. And understandably, considering they wanted to avoid any crazy hype, they released a demo, which is a good thing because that avoids a lot of the unknown things that are going on in terms of when games like Cyberpunk overhype their game without having a chance for people to actually try it out to understand if it's really for them and whether it's as bug-free or graphically perfect as they had imagined it to be. So the fact that Square Enix and People Can Fly released the demo was an amazing thing in my opinion. Some people felt that that could be bad for first impressions. I think it's a great thing. It's in fact even better than perhaps beta testing in some ways. Well, I mean, releasing a game as early access anyways. Beta testing is always important. So yeah, I mean, besides that point, let's get down to what was good and what was bad. So let's start off with the good things about it. The gunplay. This is probably what I enjoyed the most out of this game. The bolt action rifles and the sniper rifles were really satisfying for the headshots. From what I heard, the devs were also the same people who worked with the teams that worked on Gears of War, and headshots was a big thing in that game franchise. I didn't personally play Gears of War myself, but I did hear about Gears of War, and I do know plenty of first-person shooters in terms of the game mechanics for headshots. So it was really satisfying to be able to see the red skull icon pop up when I made a perfect headshot that took an enemy in one blow. And definitely the guns in this game have a satisfying kick to them and impact when blasting enemies, especially with the shotguns. Shotguns have always been one of my most favorite weapons in a game. They are short range, but because often I find myself in very close range combat, like with less than 15 meters, the shotguns, especially if they do high damage in one blast, is especially favored by me. And it seems to work a lot better for close range classes like Devastator and medium range classes like Pyromancer more so than it does the Technomancer necessarily, though the Trickster can get in pretty close range with his abilities. I haven't tried him out yet. I've only tried the Pyromancer and the Technomancer, and I've heard a lot of things about the Devastator. So yeah, the gunplay is the amazing part. It reminds me of Mass Effect and Mass Effect 3, not Andromeda necessarily. I didn't actually play that one. Mass Effect and Destiny. Like the interface reminds you a lot of Destiny here, as you can see on my screen. I've turned off the volume just so it's easier to actually hear my voice as I'm talking about this game. There are loading screens, as you can tell, so this is not one seamless open world. There is segmentation and loading of areas. So anyways, like I was saying, yeah, I enjoyed the large variety of guns and the large variety of options. It's really like a looter shooter meets Diablo or Path of Exile. And the mods in this game are either on the weapons or on the armor, and the armor mods make all of the existing skills better. So let me see here. It's like almost, yeah, here it is. So for example, the mods in the armor enhance your current skills, tend to boost those. So right now it's boosting Pain Launcher to inflict freeze, so I'm adding an extra status effect to it. In terms of the skills that I'm using, so Pain Launcher I have here, and it's a rocket missile launcher sort of thing, so it'll also freeze them by using that armor piece as well. So let's bring this up again. And the weapon mods in the demo aren't particularly powerful from what you can tell. They're mostly, you can see here, like leech by 20%, maybe boost damage by a little bit, and let me see here. None of these are specific. Weird. I swear I had different other items here. It's kind of mysterious. I'll have to check that later. So yeah, it'll add more damage to the skill, or maybe add health or life leech. And the crafting system isn't available right now in the demo, but otherwise you'd be able to extract mods that you like or want to keep, like this ruler of leeches mod, and then stick it into an existing weapon that you're currently using, such as like this base gun that has no specific mods in general. Like essentially this is a blue class weapon, and the highest level mods or loot that I've found is essentially blue class so far, though there are legendaries in the game, and these are the exceptions to the weapon mods. Like they actually add effects that are almost entirely like skills, or even take skills from other classes in Outriders and adds them to your weapon. So far, like the best chance you can have to get one of these is like I think 10% on world tier 5 or something that you can reach. I don't know if you can reach world tier 5 in the demo. I think you might be able to. At best, that's like a legendary drop radius of 25%. Right now, world tier 4 only has a 10% chance. So yeah, I mean, other people who've played the game that I've seen doing it have managed, well, they themselves haven't, but they've heard of other people who have managed to acquire legendaries. And these are similar to the idea of uniques. So they have their own unique appearances, and they also, it relates back to unique and legendary weapons from other games like Path of Exile, Destiny 2, and Diablo. So they have those special effects that also play along with that. The replayability of this game is also a great plus as well, because you can replay any of the side quests when you unlock new difficulty levels or world tiers in the demo to get more loot and better loot. So you don't know if you'll ever be lucky to get legendaries, though I must say I had other loot here, but the saving system's a bit weird, so I'm not even quite sure what's going on here necessarily in terms of saving some of the loot, but whatever, that's no big deal right now. So there's definitely a chance for a lot of random loot with different or rare stats that I showed you in the inventory window here. So this is just some of the stats that you can find in the random loot or quest rewards that you get for your character. The skill system in Outriders is big enough to really make things interesting for you without being overly complicated like Path of Exile or well, Path of Exile is the most complicated skill tree, but definitely closer to Diablo perhaps. So you have the ability to stretch it to expand into the other different lines. Like all of these are like destructive, middle of the road, health supporter, status effects sort of lines or subclasses or sublines. And the demo only really allows you to get maybe 2 points, so you really can't go very far into the class tree. But the skills themselves you unlock at most 4 in the demo because you can only reach level 7. So you have the ability to slot 3 of them at most in your character during gameplay. And it's pretty good for that reason. The 3 classes also have differing skills. The Pyromancer is probably like my second favorite because he has the ability to burn enemies, and when he attacks those enemies, they're marked, and when you kill a marked enemy, it heals you. So lots of the abilities that you start out with, the Pyromancer, for example, is the Heat Wave, which allows you to fire a raging line on the ground of fire that can set people aflame and stagger them. Feed the Flames is great for pulling enemies close for a shotgun blast to the face, and Thermal Bomb helps to turn an enemy into a flaming ticking time bomb that when you kill them, it explodes in a large area and burns and kills the other enemies nearby in a pretty big blast radius. Probably the best class that really fits Outriders gameplay style really for like getting up close and personal and being really aggressive is the Devastator, because of the ability to tank damage with his Golem ability, which like reduces 65% of damage for 8 seconds. But he has a few other abilities, like his first one, which is Earthquake, that allows you to literally stagger enemies and set them off balance so that you can open them up to being shot in the head, for example. And his third ability is Gravity Leap, which allows you to turn into a bunch of rocks and then cannonball into an enemy that you can see within sight, which is great for closing distance. And because the Devastator heals for every enemy who dies within close range of him, and since he's already going to be up close and personal, I mean, literally a Devastator with a shotgun is probably one of the most dangerous classes against the NPCs in this game right now. And because of the survivability of Golem, I mean, this was probably the most beginner-friendly class as well for Outriders. Yeah, so that's just really the thing I have to say about the Devastator. The Technomancer is also pretty interesting, but a bit clunky. It's a long-range support class. Probably works better in groups, really. It's because a lot of its abilities require you to hurl a grenade, so mostly like shrapnel. Again, you have to hurl. You have to hold the ability and then choose the target where you're going to hurl the weapon. And Cryo Turret also requires you to hold the ability and then hurl it to where you want it to, and then it'll create the turret that attacks your enemies. So that's also it's a bit slower, a bit more clunky. It requires more strategy and ahead of time thinking and preparation. So it kind of doesn't work as well with the theme of Outriders being more about aggression to stay alive and attack, because definitely the Technomancer benefits the most from having cover and using it. And one of the cons that I'll discuss later is the fact that the cover system is a bit messy, if not flawed and glitchy. There is another ability I wanted to try out later on, which is Blighted Rounds. However, I haven't had a chance yet to do that. So it kind of reminds you of the incendiary ammo or freeze ammo from Mass Effect 3, for example, or Mass Effect 2, whichever one you remember using it in. So, like I said, for the Technomancer, cover is literally the most important thing, but that's a problem in this game. And his abilities tend to be, like his best abilities, like these ordnance abilities, are kind of clunky, but they do all have status effects and do interrupt enemies. The enemies themselves are pretty diverse. You have long-range snipers, mid-range riflemen with assault rifles, close-range mob grunts who come at you with melee weapons and try to smash you. They hit pretty hard. You have to dodge them a lot. There are also bosses. Their AI is pretty good. I mean, is reasonably good. I wouldn't say it's amazing necessarily, but it's definitely challenging enough, especially with the way they built it with the combat arenas. In this game, like the way they've done the setups for the levels. But I must digress that the level design is a bit repetitive, but that's a later on con that we'll discuss. The bosses are good because they change. They have usually 1, 2, 3 abilities or something like that, while true bosses in this game have maybe 6 or more possible abilities or weapons that they can use. So the sub bosses will have maybe 3 of them, and all the bosses and sub-bosses, their abilities change as your world difficulty is altered. So if you're the higher the world tier, of course I can't see past 6, the stronger the enemies become, more hit points. They also have more health bars, the bosses anyways, for sure. And obviously you have more loot and their level goes up, but they also have sometimes different sets of abilities when you come back to do the side quests or quests at higher world tiers. So that's one thing to keep note. So it keeps the combat fresh when you come back to it later on. You come back, you have better gear, and you find out that they're maybe not so easy to kill after all, because they have different abilities that you don't expect, and you really have to learn to adapt to it. So what are some of the bad parts of what I've discovered so far in the Outriders demo? The cover system is one of them. It's probably the #1 biggest problem, besides #2, which right now I've just discovered as I'm doing this video, is the fact that the save points are kind of weird and didn't save all the loot that I just had, that I had acquired up to this level of level 6, because I had way more items here. But let's move on. We'll get to that point afterwards. So the cover system can work okay, but it doesn't work well and can sometimes screw up really at some of the worst moments. One a boss gets around the cover and I want to leave it, and I press space and it doesn't do anything, and if I use control to try to dodge out of it, I'm still locked in the cover, so that's been a big problem. And other times I've had to try to I want to turn on or activate the cover with space, and I press it constantly and nothing happens. So I'm above the knee-high cover or waist-high cover, and I'm still being shot in the torso practically by numerous enemies because I can't get into cover, and it's pretty bad and kind of annoying. It doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen at the worst of times. So some of the mantras and the devs talk about is like, cover is for cowards. And so the question becomes, why do they have a cover system at all? I mean, you could literally have built this game without using space to enter cover, because lots of other shooters and stuff like that, like allow you to just simply use crouch or jump, and you can simply crouch behind low cover or hide behind walls without actually hitting space to enter cover. And so just using that kind of natural cover system without actually having to use space to enter cover, like an actual cover system, would have been just fine, because plenty of other games don't use it at all. So why put cover in the game at all? And that's been kind of the weirdest thing that I could say about this game, really. And if you already have a heal mechanic from having to kill enemies or constantly shooting them, like in the Technomancer's case, every bit of damage they do heals them, then why not just focus on that and forget about adding the cover system in the first place, instead of putting in such a very not so great cover system, I could say, literally speaking. So it's probably better to have just cut it out in the first place. I suppose there is dodging, but again, if you have this cover system, you accidentally hit space and you get stuck in cover, like what some players have encountered, including myself, then it becomes like, well, then you get shot to death because you're stuck in cover and you can't get out of it in order to maneuver behind cover naturally without having to hit space. Another thing they don't do very well in this game is chest high cover and obstacles and walls and whatnot, because they don't tell you that you can either climb up or not on that, and there's no jump in this game either, I might add. So literally only cover that's as high as your waist but not as high as your chest is cover you can actually climb over or leap over or hurdle over, which is what they call mantling essentially. So I wish it was clearer, and that was probably another annoying thing. So I might like move up to a wall and expect that I'd go into cover mode and nothing would happen, because you literally have to watch for the space icon to appear at an object to tell you that object is usable as cover, but it's not always going to be something that you're going to see instantaneously in the heat of combat. Another big issue I had were controls, and the controls were kind of weird. Shift is for sprinting in Outriders, control is for dodge rolling, leapfrogging obstacles, mantling as they call it. I feel they could have done this better like other first-person shooters, or at least like Warframe, where if you want to sprint, you hold the sprint. Like their default is sprint is tap to toggle or something like that. I prefer held, because you're not going to be holding your sprint all the time. But again, that's not the hugest deal. And you would double tap in Warframe to do dodge rolling. So, and control in Warframe would be for crouching, and that feels a bit more intuitive for me. Maybe it's because I'm just used to it or whatnot. But in Outriders, it's a bit weird for that reason, because you're using control not just simply to dodge, roll, mantle, and whatnot, and shift just for running, and that's fine too, but there's no jumping, so space is used to enter cover instead of jumping, as in most first-person shooters. So it feels kind of weird, and there's no jumping or natural crouching, I might add, so you can't crouch in the middle of the field and fire at enemies to lower your profile. Not that it would matter, because AI auto-aims anyways, I think, or at least somewhat auto-aims, so it doesn't matter if you crouch and whatnot. But at least you would have the chance to manually hide behind cover, and if they made the crouching to be toggle crouching, so that you hit control, you would stay crouched behind the cover rather than having to hit space to enter the cover system, which then locks you in behind the cover and then makes it difficult for you to get out of cover if it glitches. So it's the glitchiness of their specific cover system that is really kind of annoying. The other problem I have is the blurriness can be a bit nauseating. So when you sprint, you can see that there's this blurriness effect, depth of blur effect. This is especially pronounced when sprinting. Like for some people, this may be nauseous or annoying to them. For me, it's not a big deal. I just find it somewhat irritating when they do this, because this isn't something that's done in other first-person shooter games I've played before. And I think it's kind of weird. I've never liked depth of blur or blurry effects as you move sort of thing. So that's another thing I did not like about Outriders. It's not a game changer, not a deal breaker for me. Another thing is the customization. Character customization is limited compared to games like Elder Scrolls Online or Black Desert or other MMOs. I mean, obviously this game isn't an MMO. This game is a totally different beast, obviously. Well, not totally different beast, but it's definitely not as in-depth. Like, you only have a certain number of faces. Like, even Guild Wars 2, I think, has like 3 times the amount of face options. Hair is also far more numerous, maybe like by 2 or 3 times, and way more color options. Markings are okay, I guess, but again, not as much customization as, say, you know, Mass Effect 2 or 3, where you could literally make yourself look like Angelina Jolie if you had the right kind of exported code set up, for example. Stash is not available during the demo. Okay. So anyways, yeah, so those are some of the things, and I mean, it's mostly face and skin stuff. I mean, you couldn't really customize your body like you could in, for example, PSO2, or like your body size, or Skyrim, for example. You couldn't really do that. So like I said, the customization is meh, it's okay, not a deal breaker either for me, but it's definitely not one of the strong points for this game. Another area that I found kind of weird or off-putting was the writing, the dialogue, and the story. I mean, it's not the worst, but it's certainly not mind-blowing necessarily. It's kind of like a Messiah sort of thing, where you, the Outrider, are again like Shepard, you know, to save the last vestiges of humanity and to explore the rest of the planet of Enoch, kind of like Mass Effect Andromeda in a way. And yeah, it's okay, but some of the dialogue comes off really weird. Like, there's one scene in the beginning where you're talking to Captain Tanner, and all of a sudden you just go into a sudden expose about your entire backstory, and it seems kind of weird and out of place and a bit, I don't know, I hate to say the word cringy necessarily, but definitely they could have done that better by showing it, or at least slowly dropping pieces of your backstory as you proceed along the main story campaign, rather than trying to, you know, go into a huge, fairly long monologue about how it felt like, and all of a sudden, you know, it just seemed a bit out of place. So, I mean, there's things like that, but everything's voice acted, which is a good thing, at least. Perhaps said, I don't know whether the story is worse or better than Mass Effect Andromeda. Certainly, I can say that your character is kind of one-sided. Like, there's not much additional dimension you can add to them. Like, there's no Renegade or Paragon system like the original first 2 or 3 Mass Effect games, for example. Like, you're almost always going to be acting like a renegade who doesn't give a damn about anyone, and you're just doing whatever the hell you want to do, your job for the most part. And most of the dialogue options don't really have any significant impact on the story's progression, as far as I can tell. So, I mean, if you're looking for that, you'll probably be kind of disappointed with Outriders as a story game. But for most games like this, looter shooters, it doesn't really matter about the story. So to me, it's not a deal breaker. But for others who are expecting something like Mass Effect, this is not Mass Effect for sure in terms of storytelling. Probably one of the more close to the final issues with Outriders, the Outriders demo that I've discovered so far. I mean, it might be different in the full game, but another issue so far is the level design is very repetitive. Like normally there'll be like every quest area will be like 2 rooms. Like the first room will just have a bunch of enemies, various kinds, you know, long range, short range, close range that you have to defeat. Once you kill them all, they drop a key that you need to open the second room of the quest area. And this means that you must kill everyone. There's no way to change the outcome of that. You have to kill everyone. You can't ever skip the first room. So there's no fancy ways of, like, you know, shooting out like the pillars of some loft area and making it crash down and kill everyone at once. There's no quick and easy solution. No instant kills like in Mass Effect, where you might select a Paragon option and then instantly end an encounter, for example. Nothing like that. So you literally have to kill everyone. So essentially these are all combat arenas. And so once you get that key and open the second room, whatever it involves, either turning a wheel or a pressure plate or something like that, or inserting a key or unlocking the keypad, you enter the second room that also has enemies, usually, not always. Sometimes it's just the boss. And it has a mini-boss or a boss. And the mini-boss or the boss is the one then you have to kill him, and then the rest of the small enemies will still be there, so you have to finish killing them all. And once you kill them all, then you can probably, the travel point will appear, so that you can leave the area, but you can also grab whatever loot that you can get your hands on. So yeah, it's pretty standard, and that's it. That's all there is to it. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. And so it repeats itself over for main quests and side quest branches, and this could grate on certain players if they're looking for more variety or bore other ones. So like I said, we can only hope that in the full game you will have more varied level designs and mission types, rather than just combat arenas where you have to kill everyone to proceed to the next room, and then kill everyone in that room and the mini boss, and that's it, then you're done. So literally the things that seem to have improved on that in terms of endgame, I mean, like to change the level design anyways, is the expeditions. And the expeditions, the devs did say that they handcrafted each of them so that they're all unique and nothing's recycled from the main story, which is good. So I don't know how they're going to look, how they're going to play out. Are they, hopefully they're not identical to the kind of quest levels that we're seeing in the Outriders 2 demo. So I wouldn't want to see this kind of 2-room design over and over again in those either. I would hope that since they're like raids, they have more rooms and maybe more complex mechanics or puzzles that you have to solve in order to defeat the enemies or the boss. So they're going to be like dungeon raids or dungeons from MMOs, and you'll need a group that works well together, that combines their powers, so you can't really solo them very easily, these expeditions. So that's better in terms of level design. And they'll also use challenge tiers rather than world tiers, which is its own level of measuring difficulty of those expeditions. So in conclusion, there's a lot I like about this game: the gunplay, the skills, and of course the wide variety of loot and loot drops that you can get, which is very similar to Path of Exile, Diablo. Essentially, as a looter shooter, the categories themselves are nothing particularly exciting. I mean, there's blue class gear, there's white class gear, I think there's another class after blue, and then there's legendary gold or something like that. So you've got all that gear, and the fact that you can replay the quests to get more and better loot, again, like Diablo and other looter shooters, you can replay raids and dungeons and expeditions and side quests and missions over and over again to accumulate loot. But unlike Path of Exile or Diablo, it's not a fantasy game, it's a sci-fi shooter looter rather than a fantasy looter game. So I'm still definitely looking forward to playing the full game when it comes out April 2021, assuming it's not delayed for some reason. So despite its flaws, it definitely has great potential. And if the devs can fix the flaws, like with the cover system, either removing it completely and improving the heal on kill system and granting, jumping a natural crouch that other games have, or further improving the game and adding even more in-game content like the expeditions further on, maybe an additional DLC or whatnot, then I can definitely see myself and others playing this game a lot more in the near future. So that ends my review of the Outriders demo. If you enjoyed my content, please feel free to subscribe, or if you have the means, subscribe to me on Subscribestar to help support my channel, and thank you very much.